الحمد لله نحمده ونستعينه ونستغفره ونؤمن به ونتوكل عليه ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا ونعوذ بالله من شرور أنفسنا ومن سيئات أعمالنا من يهده الله فلا مضل له ومن يضلل فلا هادي له ونشهد أن لا إله إلا الله وحده لا شريك له ونشهد أن سيدنا وحبيبنا وشفيعنا ومولانا محمدا عبده ورسوله أما بعد فأعوذ بالله من الشيطان الرجيم بسم الله الرحمن الرحيم قل إن كنتم تحبون الله فاتبعوني يحببكم الله ويغفر لكم ذنوبكم والله غفور رحيم قل أطيعوا الله والرسول فإن تولوا فإن الله لا يحب الكافرين صدق الله وصدق رسوله النبي الكريم ونحن على ذلك من الشاهدين ومن الشاكرين والحمد لله رب العالمين. Alhamdulillah, over the last 4 Jumu'ahs I have been speaking to you about some of the ill practices, customs and practices that are prevalent in our communities, in our societies, in our cultures, in our families, on the occasion of a demise or death of a person. And I have been speaking in particular about the custom of feeding people in various ways by the family of the deceased, the bereaved family. And one of the reasons, when you think about it, the main reason why we have these ill customs and practices in our lives, in our families, in our societies, communities, our nations and cultures, is that we have a lot of superficiality, a lot of customs, a lot of formalities. There's a lot of formalities which we have imposed upon ourselves, which don't really exist in Islam. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala loves simplicity. The deen of Islam is simple. Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala has kept the ahkam of the deen. If you look at the ahkam, the commandments of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, the sharia of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala, then you will see the sunnah of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Then you will see that it is simple, it's simplicity. When you look at the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam's life, the seerah, then you will see that it is very simple. Likewise, when you see the lives of his companions, the Sahaba radiyallahu ta'ala anhum, you will see it's very simple. Now, the reason why we do a lot of things that we do in our lives, not just on the occasion of a death, but also on other occasions of joy and sorrow, you will see that we do the things that we do because we have imposed upon ourselves all these formalities, these rusumat, and we fear what other people will say on us. Because of the very complex nature of the network of the structures, complex interwoven structures of the formalities that we have now in our various communities, our cultures and our families. So on the occasion of death, which is an occasion of sorrow, we have a lot of formalities that we do that are now ingrained and embedded, established in our communities, in our various cultures of Africa, Asia, Middle East, wherever we're from, which don't really exist in the deen. They have no foundation, no basis in the deen, in the Quran or the Sunnah. On the occasion of joy, for example, weddings, then you see that we do a lot of things in our communities, in our families, in our lives, which have no basis, no foundation in the deen. And there are very many, and maybe inshallah in the future one day I can do a series of lectures on that. Why do we do these things? Because we've imposed these things upon ourselves. Whereas the sunnah, the deen of Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala is very simple. Take for example nikah, wedding, marriage. Marriage, Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala and His Messenger sallallahu alayhi wa sallam have kept very simple. It's like ijab and qabul. That's all it is. The proposal from one side and the acceptance from the other. And the presence of the witnesses. 2 male witnesses will do. And that's it. And that's marriage, your marriage done. And that's how the Sahaba radiallahu anhum married, how the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam married. And that we know how the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam married many times. And his marriages were very simple. The most he did on any occasion of his own marriages, alayhi salam, is that he fed on just one occasion. I believe when he married Mother Salama radiallahu anha, if I recall correctly, on that occasion he fed the people, the attendees and the invitees with a slaughtered goat and bread, roti and gosht. Otherwise he used to just scatter some dates, give some dates, hand out some dates, and that's his walima done. That's how simple it was. Whereas today, on the occasion of our weddings, we know, especially Asian weddings, are renowned the world over for extravagance. I know brothers, there may be one here today who's still paying off his credit card debts. Going all the way back to 15 or whatever number of years ago when he married. Because he had to spend that money, he felt compelled to spend that money on his wedding. Whereas the weddings of the deen of Islam, the weddings of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam and the Sahaba radiallahu anhum and the Muslims thereafter, the Salaf, the pious predecessors, were very simple. Ijab and qabul. For example, Sayyidina Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu, such an eminent Sahabi, close Sahabi, companion of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He gets married and he's one of the wealthiest of the Sahaba, a tradesman, a merchant, and one of the most established, successful business people in Medinan society. In today's language, you could call him a tycoon. This is how a multimillionaire, billionaire. Sayyidina Abdurrahman ibn Auf radiallahu anhu. He gets married, he doesn't see the need to invite the Messenger of Allah, his most beloved, the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wa sallam, to his wedding. So he comes to the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam's majlis, in his presence in the masjid. The Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam notices signs of color on his clothing. There's color on his clothing because they used color on weddings. And we still do use colors in various ways in our weddings today, in our various communities. So the Prophet sallallahu alayhi wa sallam asked him, why is there signs of color on your clothes? So Sayyidina Abdurrahman ibn Auf said, "O Messenger of Allah, I got married." So the Prophet ﷺ did not mind that he wasn't invited to that marriage, to the wedding of his companion, Sayyidina Abdurrahman ibn Auf. What happens in our weddings, in almost every wedding in my community that I'm from, there's always 1 or 2 big rows, disputes within the family, surrounding who is invited, who wasn't invited, who was made the decision maker, who didn't make the decisions, and so on. There's always disputes, and then those disputes within the family, the extended family and kinship relatives, that just drags on for months and years, which was triggered by something really silly, insignificant on the occasion of that wedding. This is how simple it was. Look, a Sahabi was well known, was popular for the gravy, shurba, gravy that he used to cook. So he was very well known in Medina for the gravy, the shurba that he used to cook. His shurba or his gravy, we could call it curry now, although Arabs don't really eat curry the way we do. His curry was a good chef, a very good cook. He came to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. He invited the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alaihi wasallam for food, to dinner. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said to him, "I will only come if Aisha is also invited," meaning Mother Aisha radiallahu anha. The Sahabi said, "No, He walked away. He went some distance, and then he came back again. He said, "O Messenger of Allah, you're invited for dinner to my place. I've cooked my famous shurba, or my curry." The Prophet ﷺ said, "Only if Aisha is also invited." And then he said no. He walked away. And then on the second or third occasion, he came back and said, the Prophet ﷺ, he invited him again. The Prophet ﷺ stipulated the same condition, that only if Aisha is also allowed to come with me. Then he said yes. Now see how simple they were. The Prophet ﷺ stipulated the condition to go to his dinner, to the invitation, and the Sahabi radiallahu anhu knew that he was absolutely free to say no, refused to the Messenger of Allah sallallahu alayhi wasallam. This is how simple they were. Mawlana Ashraf Ali Thanvi rahimahullah ta'ala, commenting on this in his book Husnul Aziz, he deduces a lot of subtle points from this incident. And this is one of the things he says there is, I said that this happened before the ahkam, the laws of hijab were sent down by Allah subhanahu wa ta'ala. And he says, look at the simplicity. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam is so simple that he knows that he can say to the inviter, the host, that I will only come if my wife is also allowed to come. And the host, the inviter, knows that he is free to say to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, no. This is how simple they were. And there was no ill feeling between themselves. There was absolutely no ill feeling. What happens in our weddings or on our occasions of da'wat, invitation to food? Why do we, on our wedding occasions, the extravagant weddings that we have, in these big halls, banquet halls, that we hire for 10, 15, or whatever thousands of pounds, and then we have these lavish dinners on our weddings, why do we often see that people have run out of food? One of the main reasons is not that they haven't catered for this huge gathering of hundreds of people, but there are extra people there who were not invited, tufailis. There are tufailis, in other words, those uninvited guests. They're not guests, they're uninvited. So the ulama say, there's a saying in Arabic, and Urdu is, chor ban ke dakhil hua aur daku ban ke nikla. So he came as a chor because he wasn't invited to this dinner. He was a chor, he was a thief, and he came out as a daku, as a bandit. So that's what we do, that they're not invited, and you're invited, Abdurrahman is invited, he decides to take his wife and his 3 children with him. Now, and then by some day, Lutfurrahman Bhai has been invited, he decides to take his wife and everyone else from his household with him there. And the brother is invited, he takes everyone. Now the guy he's catered for, say, 200 people in his lavish wedding, but he ends up with 500 guests, so 400 guests. And now that is very embarrassing for him. He finds himself in a very difficult situation, he's embarrassed about it. How can he now, and I've been to weddings many times when they've run out of food. And then you're either waiting there because you have to get emergency food from somewhere, from a restaurant or wherever, whatever is available, wherever, or you have to come out without having eaten what you went there to eat or what they wanted to feed you. Because of this takallufat, superficiality, all these formalities that we have, all these extra things that we impose on ourselves, which are not imposed by the deen. Ana wa atqiya'u ummati bari'un min at-takalluf. The Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam said that me and the atqiya, the God-fearing, Allah-fearing, taqwa wale of my ummah, bari'un min at-takalluf. We are absolutely absolved and clean, free of takalluf, superficiality and formalities. Simplicity. Deen is so simple. I recall once one of our greatest masters, one of the greatest authorities in hadith and fiqh in Indian history, in Asian history, Qutb al-Alam, Shaykh al-Mashayikh, Imam Rashid Ahmad Gangohi, rahimahullah ta'ala, a phenomenal scholar during the 1800s in India, in a place called Gango, in Uttar Pradesh of India. Such a great scholar, but they were so simple. Another scholar and sheikh, spiritual sheikh, faqih of that caliber, his peer, his friend, is traveling, he comes to Gango, to Mawlana Rashid Ahmad Gangohi rahimahullah ta'ala's place, and when he arrives, Sheikh Rashid Ahmad Gangohi rahimahullah ta'ala says to the other Sheikh, and this is a very prominent, eminent, famous Sheikh who has arrived at his place. Mawlana Gangohi rahimahullah ta'ala says to him, he says, Tazi khaoge ya basi? Basi khaoge. In tazi pakani hai roti ya basi? Do you want fresh roti, bread to be baked for you? In other words, a fresh meal cooked for you, Sheikh? Or are you going to have what's left over from last night? And the Sheikh says, I'll have the basi. I'll have the leftovers from yesterday, that's fine with me. So again you see the same thing. This is the sunnah, simplicity. The great Sheikh Mawlana Rashid Ahmad Gangohi rahimahullah ta'ala is not embarrassed to say to his guest, do you want me to say to my women folk in the house to cook fresh for you? Or are you happy with whatever's left over food from yesterday, last night from the last meal? And he knows, the guest, the eminent guest, also feels comfortable, open about it, free to say to him comfortably that that's fine, I can have whatever's left over. Or he knows that if he says, no, please cook fresh for me, the host will cook fresh food for him. That's how simple they were. Another Sheikh who is mentioning this, Shaykh al-Hadith Mawlana Muhammad Zakaria rahimahullah ta'ala of India, was another very eminent authority in Indian history, Indian Islamic history. Mawlana Zakaria Kandhlawi rahimahullah ta'ala, who passed away in 1982, born in 1898. In his autobiography, it's a very massive book. There's abridged parts of it translated to English, but it's a massive book in very 2 large volumes, which is a window into their world, the world of the great ulama of the Indian subcontinent of that time, the 1800s and the early 1900s. Now, Shaykh al-Hadith Mawlana Muhammad Zakaria rahimahullah ta'ala, in his autobiography, Aap Biti, it's a very big book. He talks about the occasion when his father passed away. And his father was a great Sheikh, a great alim, authoritative alim of India. Mawlana Muhammad Yahya Kandhlawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, who was one of the most famous students of the Sheikh I've just mentioned, Mawlana Rashid Ahmad Gangohi, rahimahullah ta'ala. Now, Mawlana Yahya Kandhlawi, the father of Sheikh Muhammad Zakaria Kandhlawi, rahimahullah ta'ala, passed away suddenly, at a young age. And his eldest child was his son, his only son. He had daughters. His son Mawlana Muhammad Zakaria, Shaykh al-Hadith, rahimahullah ta'ala, who at that time was 19 years of age. 19 years of age, and he had just recently graduated from madrasa. He became a Shaykh Mawlana Alim, and he had just started teaching. And now we know, those who are from Asia here, that when you're teaching in a madrasa back in Bangladesh, India, Pakistan, or you're imam of a masjid, you know, I know how much you're paid there. You're basically paid pittance. Even today in Bangladesh, in our villages, our imams are paid about 6,000, 7,000, 5,000 taka, which is a month, which is about maybe 40, 45, 50 pounds a month, according to our currency. So now Mawlana Muhammad Zakaria rahmatullahi has just started his career. His father suddenly passes away. He's 19 years of age. Now he has to look after his sisters. He's got several sisters. He has to look after his mother. He has to take care of his old thing that his father's left behind. His father's left behind a huge debt, because his father was also a bookseller. He was into book publishing as his means of living. Now what does Mawlana Muhammad Zakaria rahmatullahi writing this in his autobiography? What does he do? Because of the fame of his father in India, and because of their family, because this is a family which has a legacy of ilm, of knowledge in India, a very popular and loved family in India, he knows that people will be flooding from all directions in India, directions of India, to come for the ta'aziyah, janaza, ziyarah of the qabr and so on. He wrote a letter to all the people that he could think of who may be coming to visit them in their village, asking them not to come. He wrote a letter. He's writing this in his autobiography. I wrote a letter to every possible person that I could think of that my father was related to, connected to, who knew my father, and there was a possibility that that person might come and visit us. I said, please do not come here. Just stay where you are and do dua for my father. Because if they're going to be coming here, then he has to feed them. He has to accommodate for them. And then more burden. And he wrote in the letter, as it is, my father has left behind a huge debt on me now to pay off. So please do not come here and burden me even further. So he felt comfortable or confident to write this? How many of us would feel confident on the occasion of the demise of my father or my mother to write a letter or send messages to everyone, Inna lillahi wa inna ilayhi raji'un, my dad's passed away, please do dua, wherever you are in your towns and cities and your countries, please do not come to my house, because I'm already burdened. وصلى الله على سيدنا ومولانا محمد وعلى آله وأصحابه وسلم سبحانك اللهم وبحمدك أشهد أن لا إله إلا أنت أستغفرك وأتوب إليك. يا الله